Ian Peatey. Welcome to the podcast, Nonviolent Communication. Today we're going to talk about nonviolent communication, and specifically your work with couples. I'm very curious what you will answer to my questions. I know you, of course, since I went to the IIT, the Intensive International Nonviolent Communication Training in Montenegro. I believe that was 2023. And since then you've been my assessor, so I'm also a candidate for certification in NVC, and so here we are. You have been teaching NVC for 24, 25 years, something around that?
Yeah, 2001, I met Marshall for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what would you add to your introduction as, who is Ian Peatey for people watching and listening?
So I'm living in Romania for about 15 years. About 15 years before that in Poland. And I'm British. You can probably tell from my accent, but I'm actually English, not British. And my life kind of split into two parts. My early life, where I was brought up in a lower middle class family, good education, good jobs, entered the corporate world, and was very much into that world. My father he's a rationalist, so everything that's worth talking about is what you can see and touch. So anything to do with spirituality or anything sniffing of the unseen, he was very dismissive of, and so was I. I grew up till my 30s, when I moved to Poland, I was still in the corporate world, and I was pretty successful, not a great success, but was a financial auditor, an accountant, and that seems very far away now. Then in 2001, I had something you might call a spiritual transformation, part of which was coming across NVC, which kind of shifted my whole worldview from one where I thought I knew how everything worked and my place in it, good job, career progression, get a house, get a car, have a family. And suddenly I was faced with, in the space of 2-hour presentation by Marshall, I was faced with a complete dismantlement, if that's a word, I'm not sure if that's a word, a dismantling of my worldview, where I saw and felt feelings for the first time. I was devoid of feelings. I was like a robot. Marshall uses an expression that we're very good at raising nice dead people. And I was the typical nice dead person, dead in the sense of not connected to myself, nice in the sense that politeness was important to me, rather than honesty. And it took some time. It wasn't like a snap transformation, but what I call the middle third of my life has been really discovering this all kinds of approaches to life, looking at the hidden connections between us, and fundamentally what makes us human. Question I wouldn't have dreamed of thinking about it before that.
Yeah, so you had a first part of your life that was heavily influenced by your father, who was, as you say, a rationalist. Then the second third of your life, would you say that is where you are right now, or is that?
I'm entering the final third of my life. I'm just turned 62, and a number of things happened round about turning 60. I became a grandfather for the first time. I changed my job to become an assessor with Centre for Nonviolent Communication. This year I had a stroke, which I couldn't have imagined that I was old enough to have a stroke. You might hear in my voice, I'm still left with a bit of a stutter, and words tend to jam into each other, or at least they do in my head. But apart from that, I've recovered from it. But that was like the passing into my final third, my 60s to 90, came with a few upheavals.
Yeah. And you say you've recovered. I'm also not super clear with my words sometimes, but you've recovered quite well, I believe, right now from your stroke.
Yes.
Did it leave any mark other than a shock, or is there something that changed? Or
it brought quite a lot in terms of slowing down, reassessing how I'm living my life. I was living at full pace. I was traveling a lot, not spending enough time with my family. So it reprioritized self-care and settlement in family life. Not being so busy. I've always been busy. And I'm learning to be happy with not being busy. Another thing it did is it brought me face to face with death. A more serious stroke could have ended in death, but a week in hospital was quite a sobering experience, being in a stroke ward, surrounded by very sick people. While I was there, several people died. Just a few. There weren't many people in the ward, but a few of them died. So it brought me face to face to death, which I hadn't really faced before. And it made it less scary somehow.
Oh, I was going to ask, of course, because death is a big topic for me personally. I actually am recording next week with my dear friend Steven, who has been a death doula. Something I've not heard before until he told me that this exists. And so for you say it actually made it did you say less scary to look forward to dying? Yeah. One of my teachers, my other teachers, Michael Taft, who is mostly a meditation teacher, he says sometimes all of spirituality, in a way, is about dying. I'm not sure if you agree with that, but I do want to pivot maybe towards that part of spirituality. I know because you shared a while ago that you are what I regard as super consistent in meditation. I have my flares of up and downs. Right now I'm in a good streak again, but I think you did thousands of days in a row. And I'm curious, what does your meditation practice mean for you? And does it influence the way you teach or how you approach life in general? Can you say something about that?
Yeah. First of all, I'll answer the question you didn't ask, which is how do I know that I've been consistent? I use Insight Timer, and I know you're contributor to Insight Timer. I discovered the app several years ago, and I'm on a consecutive streak of just approaching 2,500 days. And I'm not a big fan of gamification, but I found this very helpful in developing a consistent practice because like you said, I wasn't consistent. I found it difficult to maintain it. And I must admit, sometimes I do the meditation to do it and to keep the numbers going. But it's one of those things that I'm finding that doing it every day is better than not doing it.
Yeah.
And doing it well, or I'm not sure that doing meditation fits as a way of expressing it. But meditating, I find I currently do about 30 minutes a day. I do guided meditation. I'm currently trying out yoga nidra as a technique. And I find it super helpful for just grounding me. Having a consistent, regular, daily practice of intentional grounding. It's brought a lot of calm into my day. I start the day with it. So I start with a grounding. That's what it's bringing every day. And then sometimes I reach a deep meditative state, which takes me somewhere else. It's hard to put words to it.
Yeah.
This space, this space inside where I'm touching a part of me that is beyond the physical form. And that happens rarely. I won't claim that I reach this deep meditative state consistently.
Yeah.
But that shows that there's something more. Just touching it, just having windows, glimpses of an eternal place, stillness, peaceful.
Yeah.
That's the best way I could put words to it.
Yeah. I recognize it from my own practice. The spaciousness is very pleasant, and the stillness when it comes is so blissful. It reminds me also, I believe that Marshall was a Christian himself, and I'm pretty sure that his view of nonviolent communication was pretty heavily influenced by that. Maybe you know a little bit more than me about it.
He was actually Jewish, but I don't think he was.
Oh, Jewish.
I don't think he was a practicing.
Okay. Well, I got that one wrong then. But would you say that for you it influences, there is a clear spirituality in what you're saying? You're also naming the word spirituality a few times. So do you see that your meditation practice grounds you, as you say, does it ground you to your sense of there's something else, to a sense of openness in your practice?
Yeah. NVC was, I think, more influenced by Buddhism. There's similarity with the Buddhism. It's not based on a spiritual tradition, but the closest would be Buddhism. I think Marshall was very much influenced by that, as he was with many religious traditions.
Yeah, sometimes I say, nonviolent communication is such an awkward word. I call it sometimes mindful communication, so I definitely get where you're coming from. There's also a book, and I have to remember what it's called, but it's really about, I actually think I listened to the audio book, but it's something about mindfulness and NVC. I'm not sure the title, but you've maybe heard of that book as well? I will maybe put it in the show notes. That's really interesting. I want to ask you a bit more about that. Now we're talking a bit about Marshall and your long path already with NVC. So if you kind of zoom out and remember those early days and, when Marshall was still around, do you see a difference between how NVC was seen and practiced then versus now? And if so, what would you say are maybe useful directions? What are maybe questionable directions? Anything that you can say about your perspective on that?
At its core, it hasn't changed. What has changed is the community around it. When I first came across it, it was quite niche. 2001, not many people had heard of it. I certainly hadn't heard of it. I came across it by chance. I didn't sign up for a presentation by Marshall Rosenberg. I happened to be at a conference where he was a speaker. among many others. So it was quite niche. I think there was only a handful of trainers. Most of the work was being done by Marshall himself. He was traveling extensively. I think he could be working something like 330 days a year, traveling from place to place. And his message was fundamentally the same and unchanged. I mean, if you've read his book, A Language of Life, you will have heard most of the stories that he told in his presentations. Having seen him introduce NVC about 4 or 5 times, the stories he had a stock of stories. He was a great storyteller. So since he stopped being active, the community had been trying to hold on to the essence of NVC because it was never codified. The closest is what he wrote in his book. But you have to also watch his numerous videos to get a broader sense of what it was about. I think the main area that the community has struggled with is social change. Marshall was very keen that NVC would not leave it as a purely personal development tool, a way to make people happier. He wasn't so much interested in that. I mean, he's not disinterested, but he was interested in social change. He was interested in making the world closer to his vision of a world where everybody's needs are important. Because I think we have to agree that we're very far from that as a world.
Yeah.
The needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many. And his vision was different. But he never really specified what he meant by social change, other than that vision and some interest areas that he had. He was very drawn to individuals working in particular places. But he didn't put his name to one cause and one approach. And I think the community struggled in trying to realize that vision. With 1,000 trainers, there's 1,000 different versions of what social change should look like or could look like. So that's the biggest difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's also a question I've personally been holding, as I think I've shared with you a few times as my assessor. I've shared some of my doubts and some of my wonderings. And one part of me is asking something like, well, the world will definitely change if everybody changes, and change does happen on an individual level, I believe. Or maybe not. Maybe it's not the case, because that thought may come from the wrong, perhaps, conviction that I'm an individual, whereas actually I'm part of a web of beings. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe to pivot it towards something that you can probably say a bit more about is your own work. So I think you are not a one-trick pony. You have many areas of interest, and one of them is couples work. Unless, by the way, you did want to add something about the previous discussion. Otherwise, I can just move on to the next question.
No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the articles I read on your website, ianpeatey.com, which is also in the description, you wrote an article called The Tapestry of Needs and Desires. And I found that very interesting. That kind of caught my eye. Needs versus desires. And of course, you can say, yeah, of course they differ, but there is a subtlety, there's a nuance there. Can you say a little bit about how you see that difference and maybe the overlap between needs and desires?
Yeah. as I hold needs, but by definition and through NVC, it's not tied to any particular desire, any particular want, any particular way of meeting the need. It's somewhat intangible, so it's sometimes hard to get a handle on it. But the way I look at it is, it's if I imagine myself as being completely fulfilled and the best version of myself, to use a cliche, the best version of myself, then all my needs are satisfied. And whenever a need is not satisfied, it sends me a signal, thoughts, feelings, and some of my energy goes towards that need that's not being fulfilled. Now, the beauty is that needs can be fulfilled in a variety of ways. Now, desires, on the other hand, are coming from preferences and wishes and wants, which has more an energy of grasping, lack. I'm grabbing. I want something that I don't have. Whereas a need, as defined by NVC, is not a lack of something. It's simply the conditions that bring my humanity. So that's what I see as a technical difference.
Something comes to me, but yeah, please go on.
Example that I guess most people can relate to is the need for sustenance that we meet by eating, by putting food into our bodies, and desire for chocolate. Seems to be fairly universal, but there are a few odd people who don't enjoy chocolate. So chocolate is not a need; it's a desire or a preference or a wish.
Yeah. So one thing that's all, I think it's one of those other topics for me of ongoing contemplation, which is, it seems to me that you can actually meet your needs outwardly in the world. If I have a need for dignity, I might wear my beautiful coat, or I might speak a certain way. And at the same time, there's this practice, for instance, dwelling in the beauty of the need, which is a famous, I believe it's from Robert Gonzalez, who brought it into the world, which is also a way to meet my need quite literally, because I'm recognizing it as I sometimes say, frequency of my own being. That seems to be less the case with food. I cannot really meet my inner need for sustenance by just contemplate. I don't know. Maybe some people can. But would you say that is then also the defining difference between needs and desires? That, the essence of a desire is I kind of need, quote unquote, something from the outside to fulfill me. And is it then basically I am contracted around a specific strategy for a need, whereas a need itself, is free from strategies?
Yeah, very much I like that.
And does this also play a role in your work with couples? So maybe I know that I checked out your course, of course, which is, it looks pretty awesome. A course for couples. You have several, I believe. And one of the sessions in one of the courses is specifically around sexuality, if I didn't misread that. Yeah. And so does this come into play in how you teach couples to play with that? Because of course, desire is also so nice and juicy. And if you can have it together, it makes, sexuality wonderful. But I'm also guessing there's a dark side to it. Can you say maybe something about that?
Well, with sexuality, I find that the other thing that comes in is our conditioning, what we've learned. And it's one of the most shameful areas. In other words, we've been taught that to accompany sexuality, sexual desires with shame. Very few people are brought up without shame. If you are, you're incredibly lucky, I believe.
Mm.
So a lot of the work with sexuality is about unpacking that shame. It's a perfectly healthy, natural function. Sex is predominantly there for procreation, creativity. There's a beautiful creative element in it. And I find it a great tragedy that many people can't even talk about it with their partner, let alone engage in a completely mutually fulfilling sex life, because there's so much mixed up strategies and needs and preferences and taboos and perversions and kinks, and there's just so much in there. So
do you think? Oh, sorry. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's very much about unpacking all of that and seeing sex in its innocent, purest form.
Yeah.
How do you talk about it with you?
Yeah, I find it. I'm a bit eager to ask about it because, of course, for me, as I imagine for many people, it's such an alive topic that so many things have happened in my life and in people's lives. And you just mentioned kink, and there are people who have a whole kind of personality around kinky stuff, and I want them to have it. I'm happy for them to have it. There is a thought in me sometimes that all the neuroticism and all the maybe antidotes to neuroticism that expresses themselves in kink behavior or in BDSM, which again, beautiful, live your life. But maybe it's a bit too philosophical for an NVC conversation, but I still want to ask you the question, how do you see that is it possible that we are so neurotic and suppressed that kind of almost causes BDSM and kink fads? Again, with all the respect, how do you see that?
I mean, I don't see it as a simple one cause. I think it can be caused by repression, can be caused by early experiences of which people who are abused, for example, will maybe associate love with pain. I don't consider that a healthy expression, and it's tragic. That could be one reason. Could be many, though. This repression, I believe, does when you push things down, when you try to suppress an energy such as sex energy, is probably the most powerful human force that we know. And when you try and push it down and contain it, it's inevitably going to find a way to express itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that you kind of nuance that, yeah, of course, there's not one cause and it's not even an effect that we have to be worried about in a sense. So I really enjoy that you bring the nuance there. And at the same time, yeah, that there seems to be some personal, family, societal pressures, of course. And maybe that's good to name also. I had an interview with Liv Larsson a while ago, and she's, of course, kind of a shame expert. And I love what I learned from her, that if we're ashamed, it's actually a very strong signal from our body, from our intelligence, whatever, that there are some very important needs not being met. And typically they are belonging, they are acceptance, they are dignity. So do you work with shame as well in your courses, in your sessions? Does it come up?
Yes, it does tend to come up, but mainly I'm working with the communication aspect of couples. So trying to support people have more honest, empathic conversations with each other.
Yeah.
sex comes up as a important topic in a relationship, so does conflict, how we handle conflict. Yeah, there's a particular view of a relationship that means that says if you're in a loving relationship, you won't have a conflict. I can tell you that my wife is also a certified trainer in NVC. It's not true. In fact, NVC can bring more conflicts to the surface. The conflicts that are there don't escape.
Yeah, like because you don't avoid them anymore so much, because with NVC you're learning that conflict is actually a portal to connection. It can be intense, but it doesn't mean that something is wrong. And many people I think that conflict is somehow wrong. What do you think?
People that's it's either seen as something wrong or a battle between good and evil.
Yeah,
right and wrong. You look at much of the entertainment in the entertainment industry, and a large amount of it is about good and bad fighting and conflict, and the way to resolve conflict is to fight.
Yeah. This is also one of the things Marshall, I think, said often, right? That, or at least I think I got it from him, that we all cheer when the good guy finally at the end of the movie beats up the bad guy, and everybody's just happy that some other human being is just completely being, violated in the most horrible ways. Yeah.
And we carry a lot of that with us into our relationships, where it's seen as either a fight for who's right, or it's suppressed because it's considered to be a sign of a problem. We rarely grow up with healthy role models about how to solve our conflicts and how to be in conflict. That's wrong.
Can you say something about that? Because I am definitely not very good at being in conflict, to judge myself a little bit. I have another friend, by the way, who told me recently that he's so happy because he has a relationship and he never has any conflict. I'm happy for him, honestly, but I kind of resonate with you that, for me, that doesn't mean that makes it a good relationship. But I definitely have my own woundings and trauma and scars, and I find, I physically feel horrible and scared when I'm in a true conflict. I had one with my parents a while ago that I'm still kind of recovering from, about something very important to me. But maybe what I would love to ask you is, how are you in your own relationship when conflict arises? And do you notice a shift in how you're able to be there in that painful place, I imagine, after this long practice of NVC?
Well, there's an ideal, and sometimes we live up to it, where we see that there is a difference. Something's happening that either one or both of us don't like, or we're seeing things differently, and it's important enough to bring up. We will both remain calm, peaceful, and open to the possibility that there is no such thing as right. It's not I'm right and my partner's wrong, or the other way around. And we listen to each other, really listen to each other, and that's mutual. And in that calm, peaceful listening to each other, we don't add fuel to the conflict by misspeaking, by exaggerating, or by labeling, or using the fact that they listen to get additional points in. And I find that most of the time when we can approach a conflict like that, when we can both stay calm, self-connected, and connected to each other, it doesn't really feel like a conflict. And often the solution brings itself. It's no longer needs a solution even. Sometimes I find that just being heard is enough. I don't need a solution. Now, I'd like to say that we're always like that, but that's probably less than 50% of the time. The other 50% of the time, we tend to get into a conflict spiral where we're either not listening or we're not expressing ourselves really clearly. We're adding extra fuel. We tend to say things that when we're calm, we wouldn't say because they're not true. Exaggerate or bring in other irrelevant things. And it spirals. But with NVC, what it allows us to do is to recognize that we're spiraling. So if I compare this relationship with pre-NVC relationships, the spiral free with them deeper, longer, more painful. So it helps us recognize and calm it down. And okay, and it just takes one of us to do that.
Yep.
It's usually my wife.
It's probably not always the case, but yeah.
No, not always the case, but more often than not. And we calm down, and then it can reestablish the connection and look for what's the core of the conflict and resolve it. And if it has got out of hand, which it does do sometimes, we're not able to stop it because we're both triggered, we're both stimulated. It's painful for both of us. We can repair the damage that's been done.
Yep.
So rarely will a conflict spill over into an extra day. Whereas in the past, an argument could end with the silent treatment for days.
Yeah.
And resentment and some pain. And so it's like has a dampening effect on the intensity, and it helps with some tools to manage. So that's a lot of what our couples work is about, is helping people equip them with the tools that make navigating this much easier.
That's really cool. I have a lot of resonance. I have the same experience in that pre and post, and I'm still very much learning it. I mess up all the time. And a few things come to me as a reflection. And one is that, this is exactly why I think the word mindful communication is very apt, because it really is a kind of metacognition, or to say it simply, that space that we talked about earlier, you have more space around it. And that space is compassionate. Another thing that comes to me is that this is societal work, because one of the things that is not just like rationally speaking, taxing to society is a lot of broken homes, and also society is made up of family units and of couples. And if more people do couples work, such as with your course, it actually strengthens the fabric of society, to use an old phrase. So I would totally recommend people to check that out. And maybe already can you give, because this has taken years for me and much more years for you to get some improvement. What would be something you can already suggest for people as small first steps, when they're listening or watching, they're having conflicts in their life? What would you offer them?
I think the most useful thing that I've learned is that it's always better to listen than to speak. But to listen, not listening out for holes in their position, or but to really listen to them. And I put myself in their shoes as much as possible. That's the textbook's definition of empathy. We practice empathy. So to really listen, because then if I'm really listening, it doesn't matter what my partner says. I'm able to hear what's behind it. And I really believe that when people say hurtful things, it's because they're in pain.
Yeah.
Can I hear that pain? Not about me. So developing the skill of listening, I found critical. And I find it very helpful practice in couples is to have some kind of dialogue practice, or rather a listening practice, which is it's a standard therapeutic tool where one partner talks without interruption and the other person summarizes what they hear, and then the other person talks without interruption. You can, it's for a particular time, or it doesn't matter how you control it, but to have an agreement that for this period, this conversation that we're having, it's not going to be a conversation. It's me expressing, you listening, and then you expressing and me listening. But to be very disciplined about it. My wife and I have done that as a daily practice for years. And it really is a game changer, because you don't build up resentments. You don't build up suffering until it explodes. You have a chance in a safe way to express stuff that, when it starts is small, but if it's left, becomes bigger.
Yes.
And potentially damaging.
So what I'm hearing is that there's kind of two things. One is this kind of structural daily, preferably practice where you really can evacuate. I think it's sometimes called emotional hygiene, so it doesn't build up. And then there's also kind of the emergency practice when you're in the moment of conflict. And for people, who are really in the intensity, one of my questions on their behalf is, okay, Ian, but how if I'm in the moment and I'm feeling so horrible and I'm unclear and I'm triggered and I don't know, what can I do then in that moment?
We need to find a mechanism to stop, to create a moment. It can be a long moment, it can be a short moment. A moment of pause, which you use to disrupt your direction, to self-connect. So, what's really going on here? What am I actually responding to? What happened? What am I feeling? What am I meaning? Those three questions can really reset. But you need to find a mechanism to do that. And it's difficult when you're in full flow. The train has left the station and it's at maximum speed. And it doesn't matter what's on the tracks in front of it. Now is lying hurt and bleeding in front of you. You need to find the brake. Where's the brake? And that can be as simple as a key word that one of you will say, is like an anchor, a trigger. It can be naming what's going on. It can be taking a break, going, counting to 10, whatever works. But the best time to agree what this trigger is, this breaking moment, is when you're in a good place. It's no good doing it when you're the train on the track going full speed. You talk. I find there's an important distinction between conversations that are about a topic. something that we disagree about, something that we don't like, or something that we like, and the process by which we have the conversation. Those are two separate things. We should never try and mix them up. The process conversations are always better when we're in a good, loving place with each other.
Yeah. That sounds very meaningful. And what makes it for me personally difficult, and I think I shared it with Leaf also, is that when I'm in a moment of, or sometimes a period of shame and guilt, the difficulty is for me that I don't actually want to help myself when I'm in that place. I have such a bad judgment about myself that all those beautiful things that might help me are just not available because I don't want to help myself. So what is then for me the practice is to, and it's also is not when the train left the station, then I just have to write it out sometimes. But it's really all those other things that I do. And one beautiful thing that works for me is to do things that make me feel proud of myself and dignified. Because then it's much harder for me to go into a place where I don't want to help myself.
Well, when you're in that place of not wanting to help yourself, the relevant question I find is, well, what needs are you wanting to meet by not helping yourself? By continuing in this energy of self-destruction or relationship destruction? Or
I actually have an answer if you want to hear it. Because it's actually part of an ongoing, unfolding and therapeutic process I'm in for myself. A whole while ago, I did this work, I think it's called schema therapy, and it became kind of clear that there's a part in me that is wanting to punish either other people or myself. So in internal family systems language, that would be a part. And I believe that the need is maybe balance. It's kind of an extreme version of justice or balance. And I think it's the kind of clarity that comes to me now, it is the combination of desperation and urgency with a need to repair. I think I so want to not have said that thing. I so want to have not done that. And I can't stop it anymore. And so it's so urgent and it's impossible to fix. And that creates this high pressure with an impossible mission. And then I guess it becomes depressing and I feel completely defeated and I have to work through that. But it's very interesting to kind of see it. And again, there's kind of this metacognition of it. And I believe it's really working itself out in me at present, kind of in my life where I'm at. So the short answer, I think balance, but ultimately probably peace, harmony, that's probably there beneath a bit deeper. I want to ask you a few more questions, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
One question is, if you want to share, if you even can come up with something in a moment, but what would you maybe describe as a big or your biggest inner shift in all your years of practicing your spiritual practice, your NVC practice? Is there maybe one or a few moments where you can see, oh yeah, that was a big one? Maybe an insight or a specific retreat or something?
Well, I've mentioned one, which is the importance of listening. I believed I knew how to listen. It was not something that I trained or taught. I just learned how to listen, and no one teaches you. Realizing that, no, I don't. Listening is a very deep practice. It's very deep. That was a big shift. Another shift that comes to mind is in relationship to money. Marshall wasn't an economist, but he had a particular view on money that it's a strategy to meet needs, and it's a great strategy to meet needs. He liked money. as a strategy, but it's not something we need. And it's profoundly changed how I see my work, my livelihood, how I earn money. Before, when I was employed, it was remuneration. It was payment for the service that I'd given the company, and I didn't really think about it. It was something I deserved. Now I see it as enabling me to do the work that I do, to contribute. And I never wanted to get in the way of contributing. And I never want it to be seen as an obligation. So I try to, I'm not always successful. I try to decouple it from the work that I do and the money that I receive. And I like to have a very open conversation with my request an amount of money for my work. And it is a genuine request. And people find it difficult to believe, but it is a genuine request. And if my request is not working for you, then let's talk about it. And I would rather work for no money than not work at all because my asking price is too high. That seems to me the tragic dehumanization of I've got some things to offer. I've got some experiences and some skills and some knowledge. I've got things to offer that are useful to people. And I would always prefer to offer those, irrespective of whether there's money involved. And at the same time, I do need to keep an eye on my financial life because it's pretty much impossible to live a life, my life anyway, without money. Yeah, I can't imagine negotiating with an airline for an exchange of my services for a air fee to meet. So money's great. It's very convenient.
Yeah.
But I never want to put it at the center.
Yeah, money is a huge topic. And so my brain is trying to create a very beautiful philosophical connection there because we talked about death earlier. I think in our society, talking about the Western world, death is not really included very much, I would say. Capitalism is pretty big, trying to, hoard objects and material things and stuff and money that you cannot take anywhere after you're dead. So there's some kind of weird link there. And I really enjoy, your perspective on that. I believe it was also one of the sessions you gave at the IIT. I'm not actually sure if I attended it, but I know that it was there. It's a bit too long ago for me as well. But yeah, it's a very cool.
Yeah, I do like running training on money.
Yeah.
It's another one of those things. It's another topic that's so much influenced by our upbringing and what society has taught us and shows us. I've got a colleague that says that if you can talk about money, sex, and religion without any shame, then you're truly enlightened.
That's a nice one. And death probably too, but then maybe without fear, not so much shame. Yeah. Yeah. Death, disease, sexuality, religion. Yeah. I actually have a philosopher of religion coming on in a while that I'm looking forward to. So religion is definitely, I don't think we have now the time nor the scope to go there, but I love that topic as well. I want to ask you one last question, but I want to check with you if there's maybe anything else that you think is still in the air or that somehow wasn't mentioned yet in all our conversations so far.
Yeah, I think with couple work, I talked a lot about dealing with conflict and the shame of sexuality, but ultimately, I want to approach couples work as the relationship, our intimate relationship, as being an incredible source of learning and joy and beauty and pleasure, and to celebrate. And I think, even couples who are in deep crisis can benefit from taking the time to really appreciate each other. There are things, even if you're in a relationship where you hate your partner and you're always fighting, you surely can find some things to be appreciative of. So I'd like to bring that in as an important focus, is to have fun together and enjoy life together.
Yeah. I can say that one of the reasons why I'm very happy to get married to Yeva is because we have a great, we always can laugh a lot together. And one of the things that you just said just now when you were, expressing how you view that your work, and I completely resonate and agree, how your work can help couples, couples already versed in NVC or couples that would like to do kind of a two-in-one kind of deal, that they have more more intimacy, more connection, and have an introduction to NVC with your course. I was immediately already thinking of some couples in my life. Ooh, I would love them to go to your course. Yeah, thank you for adding that. So kind of zooming out, the last question I ask, not all, but many of my guests, is a scenario where our society doesn't make it. So it's a thought experiment. May actually happen. Our current society, Western civilization, is not going to make it. Global catastrophe. Everything is wiped out for some reason and nothing is left. But 1,000 years from now, actually there's one little flash drive found, which is the only remaining what do you call that? Something from our culture. There's a word that I don't. Relic. Yes, the last relic of our culture. And it is a flash drive that has this podcast on it. But it's damaged, so it's only the last 5 minutes. So given that suggestion that you could speak with this small window to the future of humanity, trying to build up again, what would be your message? No pressure.
Well, the first thing I would say is there's not only Western civilization, there's other civilizations as well.
Global catastrophe, everything is gone.
Catastrophe. We just watched the movie Greenland, which I think is a sequel out of it. I watched the first one, and that's a comet is an extinction level event. So you're talking about an extinction level event, but a few survivors. So rebuilding. Be grateful and enjoy life. I think we're developing a culture where things have got too serious and too unkind to each other. If you look at some of our world leaders, the way they talk about other people, I'm not mentioning names, but I think it's obvious. It's to use a judgment, it's disgraceful. I think I would like more respect, kindness, compassion. We're in it together. And when we don't recognize that, we destroy the world. That's off the top of my head. If you'd given me some notice, I could probably come up with something profound.
I would. I will take it. This sounds beautiful and right from the heart. So thanks a lot. Thank you, dear Ian, for coming on the podcast. Any last words before we round it up?
No, thank you. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the conversation. I always enjoy talking about both myself and NVC.
All right, that's a wrap then. Thanks, Ian, and see you around.